Welcome to tonight's University of Florida Visiting Artist Series. I wanted to thank the Visiting Artist Committee for helping with this project tonight. And this is our final Visiting Artist Series lecture of the season. And I'm pleased to introduce Jack Massing. I've known Jack Massing since around 2015, but I've known about his work since the 90s at some point. And so it's a real pleasure. I've been, trying to get him to come to University of Florida to speak, and it was scheduled last year, and we were unable to make it happen because of COVID. So I'm really happy that tonight we can do it, and he's here on campus to meet with some students and to do this virtual talk. And before I kind of read more about him, I just really wanted to say that in the time that since I first just found out about the art guys in school, I was really impressed by their work the first time I saw it as a student. And I was especially interested in how it could be provocative and irreverent and occur in everyday contexts. And I think for myself and a lot of my peers at the time, seeing the work of Michael Galbreth and Jack Massing was like kind of a revelation that a lot of things could happen. They were working with language that came out of ideas of Alan Capro and Fluxus and John Cage and others, and their work, seeing their work and having it be by people in everyday life that were younger, helped those ideas make a lot more sense to me. And also, the work was really important to me because it showed me that meaningful contemporary art could also make people laugh. That the idea of humor in art and in dialogue, meaningful dialogue, could really make a difference and be really engaging and interesting. And also their visual language and the use of materials like leaf blowers and Denny's restaurants and buckets and coats of paint and buckets and all this stuff, to me, made a lot of sense in terms of, it seemed to relate to like working class thinking and the things that surround us. And so it made a lot of things possible. It really opened a lot of doors. They began working together, Michael Galbreth and Jack Massing began working together in 1983 while they were students at the University of Houston. Their collaboration spanning more than 35 years is a meta project that they titled The Art Guys. Known for stage performances, public spectacles, and behavioral interventions that challenge divisions between art and life. The Art Guys have been described by the New York Times as a cross between Dada and David Letterman, John Cage, and the Smothers Brothers. The Art Guys regularly used humor and everyday materials to demystify art and welcome a broad range of audiences into the discourse of contemporary art. The Art Guys participated in over 150 exhibitions in museums, galleries, and public spaces throughout the United States, Europe, Cuba, and China. In addition, they created over 40 solo exhibitions, including the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, Tacoma Art Museum, and the De Sesse Museum and the Tampa Museum of Art. Their major public art projects include the Intercontinental Airport in Houston, the Phoenix Airport, and the University of Houston, as well as civic and private commissions. Massing was born in Buffalo, New York, and is based in Houston, Texas. Join me in welcoming Jack Massing.
Hello, everyone. I'm really, really happy to be here in this kind of hybrid state between COVID and non-COVID. I'm really, really happy to be here because of Sean. He and I are actually working on a big project together with another artist in California, which we're very excited about. So I feel good. And the other amazing thing is that you guys have been involved with Mel Chin and Mel Ziegler, both friends of mine. Both were working in Houston at some time. Mel Chin and I worked together for a few projects. And I really like those guys. They're really, really good artists. And it's great to be included in the stream of what they've done here at UF. I'm going to click over here to the slideshow to begin it. And I appreciate that introduction from Sean. That was made me blush a little.
Can I jump in?
So we have a technical issue, I think.
I think we unshared.
Chad is coming in.
Go back over here.
Could you hear me?
Yeah, everything's great, but share screen,
Oh,
that one, application window, no, sorry, Chrome tab, and this one. Share, and go for it. Okay, and then full screen, share in business.
is that working now? You have to let me in? So a funny thing happened when two guys walked into a bar. You would have thought the second guy would have seen it. Okay, so here we go. Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
That's a joke. That's a auditorium joke. So the art guys, we met in 81 actually, and we worked together for about a year and a half until 1983, when we found some paint by the side of the road and decided to shake our hands, dip our hands in the paint and shake over a piece of paper. And the resulting painting was our piece. And this is when we were students at the University of Houston. And that day is when we said, I guess we're the art guys. And that was a funny little joke that stuck. And we decided to use it later as a nom de plume to sort of erase some of the worry that people have about fine art. This is an early piece where we sold objects to each other that were illegal to be sold on Sundays in Texas. They're called blue laws. The blue laws were developed to level the playing field for merchants who were observant to religion and couldn't really work on a Sunday. Mirrors and nails and boots and different things. And this is just a photo from that performance we did in City Hall. But I liked it because it shows us in our youth. I'm going to show some early work quickly and then get into some other things. We responded to an advertisement in a newspaper about zoysia grass. It was so strong that two grown men could not pull it apart. So we tried to pull a bunch of things apart that two grown men probably couldn't pull apart either. We were kind of taking a test coat to zoysia grass. We couldn't pull this fire hydrant apart. It was very, very strong. This dumpster almost gave, but we couldn't get it. And a bridge. This was a whole series of pieces we did that was actually displayed in a movie theater before the film started in Houston. And we did that series for that exhibition. We mowed the lawn of the Contemporary Art Museum. We actually paid off the yard crew to not show up. And we showed up in their stead, and we cut the grass and did the mowing. And I put this in here because Mel Chin had a piece in the backyard of the CAM at the time. We decided to make some birdhouses and display them in our own way. So we did it on a Memorial Day weekend, north on 45 about a half hour outside of Houston. And we set up signs and we set up a display and basically a pop-up, as they're called now. And we sold birdhouses, but we treated it like a museum or a gallery show. We sent out invitations, we sent out press releases. We put the word out on the street. The only problem was people had to drive up to see the show and to potentially buy a birdhouse. So this is some of our advertising signs that we stretched across the highway that are kind of like the Burma Shave signs. These signs are not for laughs alone, buy a birdhouse or go back home. And then that led the potential viewers to our display of birdhouses. And there we are sitting out by this is automatically going now. There we are sitting out by the highway with all the birdhouses. And we actually sold quite a few of them and had a good time. It was a 2-day sale. So we had to bring all of our lunch and water and whatnot. We did a whole series of match drawings throughout the years in different ways. This was a self-portrait. This is actually a 22 by 30 inch drawing that was a mock-up for a bigger piece, which we actually did in Sweden. We would take these wooden safety matches, drill holes in the wall of a drawing like this. We'd draw on the wall, drill holes, and put the match in each hole. And then it would be lit and make these beautiful line drawings with smoke that would express, in this case, the falling art guys. It's another self-portrait piece. This is a big skull that we did on a wall, sheetrock wall. This is a large piece we did in the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston. Those little green lines that you see are actually cannon fuse. We use that device to bring the flame from one side of the drawing, excuse me, to the other. So you see the cannon fuse lit. It's basically a coin being flipped from one hand to the other. And then we found somebody in the audience to light it. That's our loved Governor Ann Richards, who was a governor of Texas. And she actually was pulled out of the audience. She was standing right there. We primed her for it. She was actually a friend of ours, and she lit it up. And it was very fun to be there at that moment. There she is as it's burning. And this is that drawing after it was finished. And you can see down on the floor, there's sand spread out on the floor to catch the hot embers and not burn the floor. So we had a little ashtray down there, basically. We finally smartened up and did these drawings and framed them. So we made some substrates out of aluminum and paper that would hold the matches and burn. These are some details down on the bottom. We, as Sean mentioned in the introduction, we like to use regular materials, ordinary things. And Mike and I both worked at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, painting the walls as basically painters to earn extra money. And we noticed that the walls of the museum were painted more often than any other interior room we could think of. Every time a show comes down, they repaint the walls, and the curators decide on colors, and they try and figure out what color to paint it, and sometimes they change their mind. So the museum basically was actually getting smaller inside because of so many coats of paint on the wall. We took that idea and we took 12 objects, 12 ordinary objects, and we painted them. And this is a table in the studio. There's a telephone, a computer keyboard, a hammer, baseball glove, a pair of glasses, and different things. And we had a chart that we, every time we painted a coat on these objects, we would put a little mark on this chart to keep track of the colors and of the number of coats. We mounted the objects on pieces of glass so you can see the bottom and see the object. And this is a teddy bear, obviously, that's getting painted with coats of paint, getting bigger and bigger. And eventually, after 1,000 coats, we were finished. And then we put these pieces of glass on another piece of glass with a glass plaque so that you could have a finished object. And if you put a glass plaque on any of your work, it's more valuable. That led to a project where Absolute Vodka asked us to do a sign. So we ended up doing this. They asked us to figure out what to do on the sign, and we thought, well, 1,000 coats of paint would be really fun. So we ended up designing the sign and then having Bernard Bernone, who's a conceptual artist in Houston at the time. He's a French artist, but he was there. And he basically painted this giant sign with 1,000 coats of paint. It was by the highway, so people would see it as they drove by and see it change colors. It took about 9 months to do 1,000 coats. And right there is where Bernard kept track of the project by putting a thumbprint after each coat. We also did these billboards in Miami and in Los Angeles. It was a very successful ad campaign. There's Bernard painting it. There's some details of the thickness and the layers of paint. So that's 1/2-inch plywood that then became very thick. Some of the stalagmites that occurred from the roller bumping. And that leads me to a project called Suits, the Clothes Make the Man. We actually worked on this project while at the end of the other project. And I don't know why this thing is continuing to run. It's not supposed to be running away from me. Todd Oldham was a acquaintance of ours. He lived in Dallas, or grew up in Dallas. And we asked Todd to design these suits for us. And basically what we did is we sold advertising on these suits that Todd designed. And the ads were actually leased, not sold. We had 56 companies that leased ad space on our suits. Whoever bought an ad got a free ad on the other art guy's pants so that we were covered with logos. It took us about a year to sell the ads, and then it took another year to wear the suits. We did it for 1 solid year. And then there was another year of cleanup and documentation. So we had actually documentary film made about us, and we had a book done on the whole project. I don't know why it's going the wrong way now. There's Todd. He's doing something to my shirt. There's Mike and I jumping for joy that the project was done. And we had a parade to launch the suits where it was just a 2-man parade in downtown Houston. And we wore them all over the country for a year. We traveled about 2 or 3 times a week. There is 20 below and outside of Anchorage, Alaska, along the Mississippi River, and along the Golden Gate Bridge. So we traveled all around doing all kinds of fun events and being on TV and explaining ourselves. This is an early morning TV show in North Carolina where we stack Krispy Kreme donuts up. There's a Santa and one of his elves. We ended up meeting a lot of interesting people along the way. We did a runway show in Times Square in New York City. Anyway, I'm going back because this is running away a little bit on me. The next project I wanted to show you guys was Marriott Plant, and some of the students here have done some research on Marriott Plant already, so I thought I would highlight this in today's talk. This is one of the very early drawings on the idea of marrying a plant. In different countries, people marry inanimate objects because they do it for different reasons. In India, sometimes women marry like a frying pan so that they are protected from the advances of men because their husband might have died or something may have happened. And people marry trees, and there's a woman in England that married a tree. And we didn't know what kind of plant we were going to marry when we started the project. It was just an idea. As with a lot of our ideas, we try and figure out what's the good one, and then we formalize it and expand upon it. So the idea of marrying a plant became something that was really bothering us, and we thought, well, we better do that. So we chose a live oak tree, and we were lucky to be included in another exhibition at the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston. This is the tree when we got it from the nursery and then in the studio. And we felt that this was a fairly innocuous and loving thing to marry a plant, to marry a tree. So we, as the art guys, one entity, we married another entity. A lot of people misconstrued this project, and it became an unfortunately, it became a divisive act on our part, even though we didn't intend it to be that. We had the wedding in the sculpture garden of the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. We sent out wedding invitations. And of course, since it was part of the exhibition at the Contemporary Art Museum, which was directly across the street, we had quite a crowd. And we had a preacher. He's with his back toward us, and we had the audience, and we had vows, and we did everything. We had a ring. We did it the whole 9 yards. Mike is putting the ring up there in the top branch. He was a lot taller than I was, so I let him do that. And then we walked the tree back across the street over to the other museum on a cart. And everybody followed us into the museum from the wedding where we had the reception. And this is part of the reception. You see the tree in the very background. And during the exhibition, the tree was actually placed outside the door of the museum to get air and sunshine. And later on, this tree went back to the studio. We were going to plant it somewhere. We wanted to plant it at the museum, but they didn't want it. We tried Rice University. They didn't want it. The University of Houston didn't want it. So we didn't know what to do. And then we were talking with the curator at the Menil collection in Houston. And they agreed to accession the tree into the collection of the Menil. The Menil is a great museum in Houston. It's a private collection. It's not like a big major public collection, so it has a very distinct flavor to it. We planted it here in a ceremony. We made a plaque for it. And the ceremony was attended by some people. That's James Searles at the podium. He's talking about the tree because he's a friend of ours and he did a lot of sculpture using trees. And Lawrence Weschler is there and Toby Camps, who's a curator at the Menil. This is at the unveiling of the plaque, and I'm talking to the public while Mike waters the plant. Unfortunately, this plant or this tree was attacked. The gay community in the city of Houston took the wrong idea about this. They thought it was a comment on gay marriage, which it was not. Proposition 8 was being debated heavily in California at the time, and there were a lot of problems with it. It was vandalized and abused, and eventually, through the pressure of this controversy, the Manil decided to deaccession the tree. There's the broken tree in the studio. And here's the tree trying to survive after the attack. And it actually grew quite well there, but the consensus was to get it out of there because the controversy was not going away. We ended up planting it in our studio yard 10 years later. The tree was very healthy and big, as you can see the slide on the right. We were asked to do a building commission by a company that owns a lot of buildings in the city of Houston. They wanted us to do something amazing, something really big and really important. So I'm showing you this because it's a failure. It's a failure that this never happened. We were very excited about it. We worked on it for about a year and a half until it was no longer viable. This building you see in the background had a giant cross on it, which had LED lighting or neon lighting in it. It's along this very busy elevated highway, which is Highway 45 that goes through Houston, and it's called the Pierce Elevated. This is all scrambled. They wanted to make a work that was iconic. It had to be easily maintained and economical. They wanted it to be the best thing, very popular, very unique, historical, and of course, as everyone does these days, they wanted social media to be a part of it. They wanted it to be a Instagram moment, no longer a Kodak moment. So we did a lot of research. We researched the library and found pictures of the Pierce Elevated being constructed. The building was built just prior to the construction of this highway. It's an unremarkable building in a really interesting, weird situation. Its visibility is amazing because so many cars go past it. It can be seen from a lot of areas around the interstate system. You see it from many different vantage points. So there was going to be a lot of people seeing this sculpture or this treatment that we were going to do. There it is. There it is from above. You can see how the highway system vantage points were very good for this structure. At nighttime, it was illuminated, and it was this giant, 16-story cross at night. It's very strange to me. We realized that the way this building was situated in the city and in conjunction to the highway, that it acted like a proscenium theater, that you typically have a stage with a curtain and then the audience is out in front. So we likened it to that, and we thought about it in that manner. We came up with 101 ideas. We presented it to the owner, and the owner couldn't decide what idea to pick, so we actually had one picked for him before we even went into that meeting. And the research that we did was extensive again. We had to measure the building, figure out how big this thing could be. We wanted to make a work that was iconic, but not a cliche. It's got to be new. We had all these goals to consider and all these things to do and think about. And we recommended making the walking building. So the walking building was going to be two large animated arms on the sides of this building that were motorized and could actually move. This is a little animation of it, a crude one that we made. It's all distorted for some reason. It was going, the arms were going to be big, obviously, very large, flat aluminum arms. And we had to probably build tracks to hold the bottom at the wrist, maybe in the elbow, so that it would ride. If it got too windy, it would have to probably be just, shut down electronically, so that if the wind got too high, we had safety issues. And unfortunately, the project was canceled. But it would have been fun. Here's the walking building in relation to other monuments around the world. You can see it over there on the far left. And here it is in relationship to the other buildings in the city of Houston. I know this is really riveting. You guys have to just simmer down a little bit. Thank you. It's a joke. Moving on to Forever Yours. This is a project that Michael and I worked very hard and long on for many years. It was an idea that that is actually very important to this lecture and very important to what we have done throughout our career. Forever Yours is basically 2 funerary urns that would hold our ashes after we pass away. In order to do this, we had to scan our heads and make busts of ourselves. So we had some technicians come in with these high-speed scanners and scan our heads. Here I am talking to the technicians who were doing the scientific scanning of our heads. And Mike made a funny face and tried to hold it for one of them. We were goofing around a lot with it, trying to figure out what our face should look like. Oh, God dang it. So these are foam blocks that were used to carve the models for these heads. And then we had to digitally change the shoulders and chest so that it would become more of a, I don't know what's going on here. Going to change or not. So these are made out of foam, which we then translated into wax and then into bronze. We made an agreement for whoever bought this. No one ever bought it. And that agreement is a legal document that we framed and made large, and it goes with the piece. These are just the foam heads. This was very early on before we actually cast them. And then Ken Little in San Antonio, he's another friend of ours and an artist and teacher at UTSA. We worked with him and his foundry to make the molds and to cast them in bronze. There's Mike and Ken. There's the wax renderings finished. And there it is finished. That's in our studio. We painted the wall red and hung it and put it on pedestals that we painted red. And we tried to sell this piece for $1 million. We failed again. The idea of selling this was interesting to us because it was like inverted life insurance. If you buy the art guys, you can see that they get the money before they're gone. You know, some people want to have a Warhol on their wall, but you could actually have the actual art guys in your collection. And then it's not working right. Mike passed away, unfortunately, so he's actually now in his bust. He's now in his bust. And I'm next. Again, there's the agreement. And there's Mike. And I had to put him in there, and then we had his wake on January 25th of 2020. I don't know, that's going the wrong way. So there's the plaque. And here it is in our studio when we had a gathering and a memorial service for Mike. And when we made this piece, we agreed that the faces would always face forward. But I took the artistic liberty of turning my bust looking toward Mike. I thought it was appropriate. And that brings us to the end of the talk, but it's all bollocksed up.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
We have some questions. I wanted to, at the beginning, I forgot to mention it, but I was hoping that you could maybe talk a little bit about your show with William Wegman at the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery in Fort Myers in the fall.
Yeah, so Jay Dellinger, who is a curator here in Florida, he lives in Tampa, and he is the director of the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery at FSW, which used to be Edison College. Jade has been doing some amazing programming down there, and he curated the show that we had at the Tampa Museum back in 2006, I think it was. And he's invited me to come to FSW this fall at the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery and set up a studio. Well, it's kind of my idea to do that. He wanted to do something that was interactive. And I thought it would be interesting to set up a studio there and work. And I'm doing a lot of collaborations right now with other people. And what I want to do is basically work and produce things as the collaborations go on, and then put those collaborations up on the wall in a display. Bill Wegman and I have been exchanging ideas lately, and he's agreed to put some of those ideas into that show. So I'm really excited about that. And that I'll start that on the end of August and go to mid-December.
On track.
Okay, we have another question.
This one?
Yeah. Do you plan on doing anything else Art Guys related, or do you plan on moving on and leaving Art Guys as a memorial of sorts?
That's a great question. And as I related earlier, when the Art Guys married the Plant, we thought of ourselves as a single entity, not as two guys really. And the art guys, when one of us passes away, obviously that's the end. So no, I'm not going to do anything else art guys. Nothing will have the art guys name on it. Unfortunately, I can't help who I am, and putting all that work into the art guys has, there's a lot of residual there. So a lot of my work is going to look like that in a way, even though I'm trying to break out of a mold if there is one. But it's such an enjoyable way to work anyway. I don't want to have to change too much. But most everything going forward will be under my name. But there may be a point at some time in the future where we have a show of art guys' work, and then we'll bring that out of storage and display it. How would or did you approach funding opportunities for the walking building? Would it be through corporate sponsorships? No, it wasn't. In fact, the heartbreaker of that whole project was that the owner approached us. He wanted us to make an icon for the city of Houston. He wanted the art guys to think of an idea that was just off the charts cool and interesting. He told us at the beginning that he would pay for this with his own money. That wasn't true. He was not being truthful with us. After we designed the whole thing, he wanted to bring it to the city of Houston and get a tax abatement, which developers do a lot. They try and wrestle money from this, basically from the tax base, to get things done for themselves that they'll make more money off of. That's a lot of what happens with sports stadiums on a large scale. When the city didn't allow him or grant him the tax abatement, he ended up dropping the piece. And it came out of left field. We didn't expect that at all. It just dropped. So it was a blow. Mike and I were just so pissed off because we worked for another 6 months on it without getting paid a dime. So we had a lot of time and energy into it, and the guy just kind of jerked us around. Craig Smith. When there is pushback or when a project is not actualized in the way the art guys initially conceived, what sort of opportunities have been? There's been a lot of things that we've tried to do that we couldn't do, and we honor the work by recording it as a proposal or as a drawing. So those things that fail to be made, they don't fail as an idea. We end up basically just housing those ideas and cataloging them in the flat files. Several projects that we've done went south or sour, and we pivoted and changed our way of working and realized something that was a little different. There's been several large projects that, of course, when you do a large project, it's kind of designed by committee. You have all these stakeholders and you have people that are funding it, municipalities that are involved, and they put pressure on you to change the scale or the color or the idea. I mean, it's just always moving. But we kind of, work with it and try and get it to resolve itself. It does change, but it's oftentimes rewarding to go through the process of changing an idea. And it becomes different, but it's still the course of work. Oh, what is our next project? Well, my next project, I'm actually working in the studio on a series of small pieces, but I'm also working on a large outdoor sculpture. And I kind of feel bad I didn't include any of my recent work in this talk, because it's sort of a missed opportunity for me, but I wanted to do this talk as an art guys talk to honor Mike. And so I'm doing this project with Jay Dellinger at the Rauschenberg Gallery at FSW. I'm making a large outdoor sculpture in my studio, and I'm working on a whole series of small framed objects in my studio as well. My brother, Peter, and my father, Paul, the three of us were lucky enough to have an exhibition in St. Petersburg that just came down about 2 weeks ago. And in that exhibition, I made a lot of small pieces, which I'm still working on. So that's kind of ongoing.
All right. Well, Jack, thank you so much for the presentation tonight. And we'll be meeting with some of the graduate students in seminar after this, as well as some of the class, the materials and methods class in sculpture tomorrow. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys, and good luck with everything.